Okay, so we are going to look at herbaria. Many of you are probably not familiar with what herbaria are, but these are basically the natural history collections for plants. I'm sure many of you are familiar with natural history museums across the world, but mostly we see the animal collections, insect collections, dinosaur bones, and all of the other things. So herbaria are the natural history collections for plants, and they are basically collections of dried plant material mounted onto pieces of cardboard and then filed in a facility. If we were functioning normally, we would have visited the Compton Herbarium, which we find at Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens. But in the current situation, we won't get there. But this is taken inside the Compton Herbarium, and we can see that a herbarium is a collection of dried plant material in association with literature. So from the lecture on the history of taxonomy, you can see that literature is then the classification that has been published for a particular group of plants. So that classification gives us the order in which the species are arranged. So the collections are filed in a systematic order. We have species that are arranged into genera and genera arranged into families. And then these families are arranged in a linear sequence according to whatever classification is that you follow. So what we find in these collections are herbarium specimens. Here you can see these are basically dried plant material that have been pressed and mounted onto a piece of cardboard, and it has a type label that gives us a lot of information. So we have the name of the plant, genus and species, we have the date, we have often a GPS locality, and then here a more detailed description of the locality, also a description of the plant and the vegetation it was found in, and then a determination where an expert has verified the name of the plant. So these collections are what we find in the herbarium. We often have also got envelopes on these for loose flowers and seeds, etc. And what's important is that each collector of plants, when they start collecting, start with the number, your name and surname and the number 1. And then throughout your career you would have each specimen that you collect, number 2, 3, etc. Some collectors collect thousands in their careers, but that collector's name and number is then what important for identifying each collection. So we have herbaria across the world that document the floras of parts of the world. For ease of reference, we use acronyms or abbreviations for these herbaria, which are catalogued online in Index Herbariorum, or the Index of Herbaria. The largest herbaria are European or American. You can see the Natural History Museum in France with about 9 million specimens. Kew Gardens has the Kew Herbarium, which is the second largest. Then also important ones in Stockholm, New York, London and Switzerland. And then we have, of course, important local South African herbaria. These are all associated with the South African National Biodiversity Institute, or SANBI, and they are associated with botanical gardens that we find in most provinces of the country. The largest in South Africa is the National Herbarium, which is the largest herbarium also in Africa, which houses now probably about 2 million specimens. The Compton Herbarium in Cape Town, about 1 million specimens, and then Natal Herbarium, about 50,000 specimens. So these three are the ones, we call them national herbaria, that are associated with SANBI. And then each university also has a herbarium to facilitate research. So when you have a herbarium at a university, it means that you can receive specimens on loan from these herbaria to study, and then you send them back when you're done. The largest university herbarium is the Bolus Herbarium at UCT, and then we also have a herbarium at UWC which houses about 8,000 specimens. So what are the functions of herbaria? They are obviously there to provide information. As we saw when we looked at the herbarium specimen, that label contains a lot of information, and we would have lots of collectors collecting plants and contributing them to herbarium collections. So you would have collections from plants all over the region. So information system service to the public, environmental planners, people working in conservation and also research. And importantly, they can also provide an identification service. If you have an unknown plant, you can send it to the herbarium and they can identify it. They also do research, and you can see here some of the outputs that they produce. It's a major function, and herbaria provide the raw materials for research in plant systematics or plant taxonomy. From the collections we can tell a lot of things. For example, the number of families, genera and species in a known area. If you remember the flora with the capital F. Where poor or rarely collected things are, the known distribution of a species, because you would have lots of people collecting the same species from different areas. In that sense, you could also then look at variation across different populations of species, the habitat that they found in, how we distinguish between species. And then of course we always discover new species, so if a no name exists, then new species have to be described. Who uses herbaria? This list is not exhaustive by any means, but you can already see that there are quite a number of people that rely on herbaria. Nature conservation agencies, NGOs, environmental impact consultants, university students, gardens, schools, even hospitals and other sectors rely on herbaria. Often when there are poisonings, those plant materials can be brought to the herbarium for identification. We've had a lot of reports of horses and other animals that are poisoned by specific plants, and they can then be identified. So what process does the material go through before it gets into the herbarium? And that is the process of plant collecting. Remember, we said that the herbarium specimens are dried and pressed. Pressed means that they are placed in a plant press, and you pull these tight, and it basically presses the water out of the plants and also flatten the plant material into a two-dimensional shape. And they are tightened with these straps with D-rings. When we're out in the field, we take along the press, but also a lot of other equipment in order to collect plant material. Plant material is often collected into bags and later placed in the press. Aquatic plants, we can throw out a rake onto the water surface and rake plants to the side. And then we also record in a collecting book all that information that you saw on the label of the plants. So the dates and the collection and information on the plant and other things. We then mark the collection with the collector's name and number. Remember, I said that that's the important identifier for each collection. And then we also collect material into different chemicals for various purposes. We would collect it into formalin for anatomical research, into silica gel for DNA studies and other things. Then at the herbarium, we have people that specialize in mounting these plant materials. So once you come back from the field and that material in the plant press is completely dry, they physically glue it onto the cardboards, and they use gummed paper and metallic weights to glue these things down and to create the herbarium specimen. Sanby has a database in which the collecting details are entered, and the label is then produced that is stuck onto the herbarium specimen. Here you can see the unpopulated label, and that is then typed from the database, and various instruments are used to mount the specimens, and each herbarium also has a unique stamp that they place onto the specimen, and then the database also produces a unique barcode for each specimen to identify.